In presenting this record, we hope that the ultimate allure of Nirvana, and especially Kurt, as well as the passion that we had and have for the music we made, is once again brought to the forefront. Let all the analysis fall away like yellow aged newsprint. Crank this record up and realize the bliss, power, and passion. Total Nirvana. From the Muddy Banks of the Wishkah is a compilation of 16 live Nirvana tracks that were recorded between 1989 and 1994. The album was released on October 1st, 1996, around 2.5 years after the death of lead singer Kurt Cobain, and performed very well commercially, debuting at number 1 on the Billboard 200, selling around 160,000 copies in its first week of release. The album went on to spend 25 weeks on the charts and was certified platinum in the US with sales of well over 1 million. Following the death of Cobain in '94, there was a demand for new Nirvana material, and this is where we got the release of the Nirvana Unplugged in New York set. However, originally Unplugged in New York was set to be a double album. One side was the Unplugged set, and the other side was going to be a live album. However, the task of compiling that album at the time proved just too overwhelming for Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic, who had just lost their friend and bandmate. So the project was scrapped and just Unplugged was released. However, around 2 years later, fans did get to see a live Nirvana album released. And that, of course, is from the Muddy Banks of the Wishkah. The title of the album refers to the Wishkah River in Aberdeen, Washington, where Cobain claimed as a teenager he had spent nights sleeping under the Young Street Bridge there. And another, maybe lesser-known reference to the Wishkah River is, when Kurt was a teenager, apparently his mother threw Kurt's stepdad's guns in the Wishkah River. The reason for this, apparently she had found him cheating on her. And so the story goes, Kurt went to the river, recovered some of the guns, and sold them to buy his first guitar. Is this story 100% based on fact? It was known that Kurt already had a guitar by this stage. However, Kurt couldn't pass up the opportunity of telling such a great tale. So, as we look at the songs on the album, I will be referring to the liner notes, which were written by Chris Novoselic. Novoselic took on the bulk of the work compiling this album and talks about the tracks in more detail. He starts, "We played around for 2 years before the release of Bleach in June 1989. At the time, live shows were our bread and butter, this being prior to the release of Nevermind in September of 1991. We'd hit the road for months at a time, coming back with $1 or $2 grand to be split 3 ways. In those days, that was about as much success as we thought possible." From the Muddy Banks of the Wishkah opens with a 50-second intro, basically of Kurt Cobain screaming his lungs out. If you don't want to be deafened, it's probably best to not put your ears too close to the speakers on this one. The earliest performances on this album are of a soundboard cassette recording of a December 1989 show at London's Astoria. Breed, which was then called Imodium, and the rock version of Polly are both taken from the show. And as a side note, those 2 tracks, Breed and Polly, are the only 2 songs that former Nirvana drummer Chad Channing plays on this album. And that intro we get with Kurt screaming is also taken from the show. Immediately following the release of Nevermind, Nirvana went on a tour headlining small venues that culminated with a Halloween homecoming show at Seattle's Paramount Theater. This show was filmed and recorded onto multitrack, yielding the version of Negative Creep used in compiling this record. And that is track 13, the only song from this album that was taken from that Paramount Theater show. 2 days later, the band left for another European tour, and this is where you get Nirvana's show at the Paradiso in Amsterdam, Netherlands. That show was on November 25th, 1991, with the songs Skull, Being a Sun, Lithium, and Blue taken from that show. And the version of Spank Through that we get on this album, which is a very awesome version, I might add, that was recorded just 6 days prior to the 4 tracks I just mentioned, and that was recorded on November the 19th in Rome. Novoselic adds, "We ended the year with a brief West Coast tour. The bill included Pearl Jam and Nirvana and was headlined by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Not too shabby, if I might say so myself. The second show of this tour was on December 28, 1991 at the Del Mar Fairgrounds, just outside of San Diego. For whatever reason, our set was particularly aggressive that night. Drain You, Aneurysm, and Smells Like Teen Spirit were all taken from this recording. And those songs do sound great. Following the release of Utero in 1993, we once again hit the road, using leftover props from the Heart-Shaped Box video shoot as set dressing. We were playing big halls on this tour. It was felt that we needed to bring along a big sound. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Pat Smear." And this is where we get the introduction of second Nirvana guitarist Pat Smear and the 4 songs that he played on this album. Novoselic continues, "Scentless Apprentice was filmed and recorded by MTV for their 1993 New Year's special, recorded at a show at a pier in Seattle. Heart-Shaped Box comes from a soundboard DAT recording from a show at the Forum in Los Angeles in December of 1993. We took Milk It from a soundboard recording from the Seattle Center Arena. And Sliver is taken from a board tape from the Springfield Civic Center in Massachusetts. And just going back to Milk It, track number 12 from the album, that one was recorded on January the 5th, 1994, the only track on the album from 94, and the recording of that song taken exactly 3 months to the day before the death of Cobain. The album cover is a collage of sorts, mixing 10 different photos of the band. And as you can see on my old school cassette here, you've got various information on the tracks, more photos, and those liner notes from Chris Novoselic. And as a bit of an extra for experts, the vinyl edition of From the Muddy Banks of the Wishkah contained a bonus track on side 4 of the album, and was various outtakes and clips of the band just goofing around and making jokes and having a good time and stuff like that. In fact, I'll play a couple of clips from that now.
The song is dedicated to Frank Zappa and River Phoenix, Fred Gwynn, who played Herman Munster, Dixie Lee Ray, Thomas P. Tip O'Neill, and you dumbass who just threw water on me. I'm just trying to... Hey! Spent all my life trying to stay away from sports, and here I am in a sporting arena.
So this release is full of high-quality Nirvana live recordings. These songs sound very good here. This album was a huge smash when it came out, of course, back in '96. Kurt had only been dead for around 2.5 years at the time of the release of this album. And as I say, the demand for Nirvana material was pretty high at that time, as you would expect. Songs such as School, Teen Spirit, Milk It, Negative Creep, Blue sound really good on here. And one of the standouts, in my opinion, Spank Through. Not a Nirvana song you may always hear a whole lot about, but that's a really great recording, great version of this song on here. And overall, just a very cool, hard-out, pumping Nirvana live album.
If If you throw one more shoe or one more coin, I'm going to turn my guitar amplifier and leave for an hour. And it's going to be massive feedback for an hour. Because when one rotten apple in the class f***s it up, the rest have to suffer. Okay?